Have you ever seen a movie like The Matrix and thought, what if everything I'm experiencing right now isn't real?
Yeah.
It's a question that's probably crossed your mind at some point.
Yeah, and actually that question has echoed through history for centuries.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a 17th century philosopher named René Descartes was actually grappling with incredibly similar ideas centuries before CGI and virtual reality.
Wow, so no red pill or blue pill for Descartes.
Yeah, no pills.
But he was searching for some intellectual certainty.
Yeah, he lived in a really transformative period before modern science as we know it was established.
Right.
And he wasn't really satisfied with the way of thinking at the time, which
Yeah.
was called scholasticism, a philosophy that leaned heavily on the ideas of Aristotle.
Okay, so back then, everyone was basically just taking Aristotle's word for everything.
Pretty much. And Descartes was looking for something more...
More solid.
Yeah, more foundation.
Maybe more evidence-based, I guess.
Exactly. So he developed this method of doubt.
Yeah, the radical method of doubt. I remember that from Philosophy 101.
Right. He decided to question everything he thought he knew.
Everything.
Yeah, to find something that was absolutely certain.
So it wasn't just to be skeptical for the sake of it.
No, his skepticism had a purpose. He wanted to find an unshakable foundation for knowledge.
So when he said everything,
Right.
what exactly did he mean?
Well, he started with our senses, things like sight, sound, touch, taste, smell.
Right, because our senses can be unreliable.
Exactly. We see mirages, mishear conversations all the time. So Descartes wondered, how can we be sure that anything we perceive through our senses is actually real?
Okay, so he's doubting our senses. Makes sense, but did he stop there?
Nope, he went even further.
Right.
He questioned everyday occurrences, things we usually take for granted.
Like what?
Like brushing your teeth in the morning? Could that entire sensory experience be a deception?
Wow. Doubting brushing your teeth, that's next level skepticism.
Right, but it gets even deeper.
Deeper how?
He even questioned mathematical truth.
You mean like 2 + 2 = 4?
Exactly. He wondered, what if there's some powerful being controlling our thoughts, making us believe these things?
So he was thinking like, what if there's a matrix?
Yeah, kind of. He imagined an evil demon. But today, we might call it a wicked neuroscientist manipulating our perceptions.
It's like that scene in The Matrix where Morpheus offers Neo the red pill and the blue pill.
Exactly. Descartes was essentially asking, how can we be sure we're not living in some kind of simulated reality?
So he's basically stripped his mind of all beliefs, all assumptions.
Precisely, he's starting from scratch.
And I remember that this is where his famous cogito argument comes in.
You got it. Amidst all this doubt, Descartes had a breakthrough.
Which of us?
He realized even if he was being deceived about everything else, he couldn't doubt the very fact that he was doubting.
Because doubting is a form of thinking.
Exactly. And if he is thinking, there must be something doing the thinking.
Leading to the famous line.
Cogito ergo sum. I think therefore I am.
So simple yet so profound.
Right in that moment of doubt, he discovered an undeniable truth. The certainty of his own existence as a thinking being.
But that's all he's sure of, right? His mind, his thoughts.
Yes, at this point, he's still not certain about the existence of his body or the external world.
Okay, so he's got this one solid brick, the cogito.
Yeah, the foundation.
How does he rebuild from there?
Well, he tries to use this foundation to prove other things,
Right.
like the existence of God.
Didn't Crash Course mention that there were some problems with that argument?
Yes, many philosophers have criticized his proof of God's existence, but for Descartes, it was crucial.
How so?
He believed that a perfect God wouldn't allow us to be systematically deceived.
So if we have these clear and distinct ideas, like our perception of the physical world,
Then a benevolent God would ensure that those ideas correspond to reality.
so it's through this belief in God that he gets back to believing in the physical world.
Yes, and ultimately his aim was to provide a solid foundation for scientific inquiry.
So it's all about finding certainty in a world where everything can be doubted.
Precisely, he was trying to move beyond mere opinions and establish a system of knowledge based on undeniable truths.
But of course, this is just one way of looking at knowledge and reality.
Right, and it's certainly not without its flaws.
And then comes along empiricism, which offers a completely different perspective.
Exactly. Empiricism emphasizes the importance of sensory experience as the source of knowledge.
So instead of starting with reason like Descartes,
Empiricists start with what we can observe and experience through our senses.
and John Locke, a key figure in empiricism, famously rejected the idea of innate ideas.
Yes, he proposed that we're all born with a mind, like a blank slate, a tabula rasa.
So everything we know comes from experience.
Precisely, our senses are constantly providing us with information about the world, and that's how we build our understanding.
Locke also made a distinction between primary and secondary qualities, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Can you remind me what those are?
Sure, primary qualities are inherent in the object itself, things like solidity, extension, shape, mobility.
So for an apple.
Its weight, its size, its roundness.
Right, those are all primary quality.
Exactly. They exist independently of our perception of them.
And secondary qualities.
Those are more about how we perceive the object.
So for the apple?
Its color, its taste, its smell.
These are subjective.
Right. They depend on the observer.
So Locke was trying to say that there's a difference between the objective reality of the apple
and our subjective experience of it.
But then George Berkeley comes along and kind of throws a wrench in that whole idea.
It does. Berkeley argued that we can never actually perceive primary qualities without also perceiving secondary qualities.
Meaning?
We can't imagine an apple without any color or texture.
So for Berkeley, all qualities are mind-dependent.
Exactly. For something to exist, it must be perceived by a mind.
To be is to be perceived.
That's Berkeley in a nutshell, and to avoid the idea that the world just pops in and out of existence whenever we're not looking.
He introduced God.
Right, God becomes the ultimate perceiver, ensuring that everything continues to exist even when we're not looking at it.
So Berkeley was pretty radical in his idealism.
He was, and it's an idea that many find difficult to accept.
Because we tend to believe in a world that exists independently of our minds.
Right, but Berkeley's philosophy challenges that assumption.
And this brings us to Immanuel Kant, who tried to find a middle ground.
Yeah, between the rationalism of Descartes and the empiricism of Locke and Berkeley.
Kant called his contribution to philosophy a Copernican revolution.
A pretty bold claim.
It was. But Kant saw his work as a fundamental shift in perspective. So instead of our minds passively conforming to the world,
Kant proposed that the world of our experience conforms to the structure of our minds.
a complete reversal.
Right. He argued that our minds actively shape and structure reality through these innate categories of understanding.
So it's not just about passively receiving information through our senses.
No, our minds play a much more active role in constructing our experience of the world.
And Kant also talked about different types of knowledge and judgments.
He distinguished between a priori knowledge and a posteriori knowledge.
Remind me what those are again.
A priori knowledge is independent of experience, things we can know through reason alone.
And a posteriori.
That's knowledge we gain through our senses through empirical observation.
Okay, and what about analytic and synthetic judgments?
Analytic judgments are true by definition.
Right.
Like all bachelors are unmarried men.
The predicate is already contained in the subject.
Exactly. And synthetic judgments add new information to the subject.
Like?
This bachelor is happy.
Right, we're learning something new about this particular bachelor.
Precisely. And Kant argued that there's a special kind of knowledge that's both synthetic and a priori, knowledge that's both independent of experience and tells us something new about the world.
So like math and geometry.
Exactly. Those were his prime examples.
We know these truths with certainty, but not just from observing the world.
Right. There's something more fundamental going on.
So how did Kant explain this synthetic a priori knowledge?
He said our minds come equipped with these innate structures or categories of understanding.
Like pre-installed software?
Kind of. These categories aren't specific ideas, but ways of organizing and making sense of sensory data.
And these categories shape our experience of the world.
Exactly. And because we have these categories, we can know certain things a priori.
So it's like our minds are projecting a certain structure onto reality.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
And this leads to Kant's distinction between phenomena and noumena.
Right. Phenomena is the world as we experience it, shaped by our minds.
And noumena.
That's the thing in itself. The reality that exists independently of our perception.
Which we can never truly know.
According to Kant, we only ever access the world through the filter of our minds.
So we're always seeing the projected image, not the raw input.
Exactly, and this is where he differs from Berkeley.
Because Kant is saying that there has to be something out there.
Some external reality that's causing our sensations.
Even if we can't know it directly.
Right. He's not denying the existence of an external world.
Just that we can never fully grasp it.
And later philosophers like Hegel would challenge even this idea of a thing in itself.
But Kant's philosophy had a huge impact on Western thought.
He fundamentally changed how we think about knowledge, reality, and the role of the mind.
And he was part of a larger intellectual movement, the Enlightenment.
Yes, a period of radical change in how people thought about the world.
Challenging traditional authority, questioning the nature of knowledge.
And advocating for individual rights and freedoms.
So we've come a long way from Descartes' radical doubt.
We've explored different perspectives on how we come to know the world.
From the certainty of the cogito to the sensory-based empiricism.
And finally, to Kant's revolutionary idea of a mind-structured reality.
And I think it's really fascinating to think about how these philosophical ideas might influence our own lives.
Yeah, how do we approach information? How do we form our beliefs about the world?
Are there certain things that we know with absolute certainty, like Descartes?
Or do we rely more on our sensory experiences like Locke?
Or maybe we see the world as being shaped by our own minds, like Kant.
It's something to think about as you go about your day.
Maybe we're all living in a simulation.
Maybe.
But even if we are, there's still that one undeniable truth. I think, therefore I am.
And that's a pretty good place to start.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the nature of reality and knowledge.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another philosophical exploration.
Until then, keep questioning and keep thinking.